Kick one off, and then we'll see if anyone else has any questions. So let's start with, what are the biggest threats within your environment or customer base, and what are people most concerned about given the recent major vulnerabilities?
All right, Zach, what do you think?
Our biggest concern is probably data loss prevention right now. We're a university, so I have students, I have faculty, I have staff, I have researchers, people remote, people on site, everyone's sharing data to everybody else, to other institutions, to other research organizations. So kind of condensing that down into where its footprint lives and how we secure it and who has access to it is our biggest challenge right now. And I think everyone has a challenge with DLP, and I don't know, there's no great solution out there, so that's an ongoing battle for us right now.
So I work for a mining company, and I would say right now for us, our biggest concern is operational technology. So securing the process control networks, especially with an increase in artificial intelligence, autonomous vehicles, different ways out at the mine sites that we can produce and mine coal more effectively, more securely, but also more safely for our people. Because right now, well, yes, ransomware is big and scary, and it'll make my CFO very nervous. Our number one priority is our employees' safety. And so I'm concerned about what happens if we have an attack on a ventilation system for our underground miners. What happens if an autonomous dozer, possibly gets hit remotely and someone, moves it off track to a different location? What kind of significant attacks does that affect on our personnel safety rather than just our data or our financial concerns?
I work for a large bank, and what bothers me a lot is phishing. The best technical and infrastructure systems in the world can't help me if somebody can convince my employees to just give them a password or an MFA code. So that requires state-of-the-art mail filtering, but also regular reminders and reinforcements of good email hygiene. So I'll
All right, do we have any questions yet? Before we, got one up here, so he's coming, so hold tight just a moment.
So we did a whole lot of speaking about APIs and nation states and remote execution of threats, but generally speaking to you gentlemen, how do you view students when it comes to the threats from an inside perspective?
Students, first of all, it's ladies and gentlemen, right? Or lady and gentlemen, so look, thank you. But students as insider threats, I think I'm going to pass this one over to Zach.
Students are definitely could be a threat. They are a threat. What we do is we kind of segment them off. So we have tools in place to kind of, based on their identifiers and how they are, to segment them away from the normal network, give them pipe straight to the internet, and keep them separated for anything production related. So anything that we need on a day-to-day basis, we've thrown out into different SaaS platforms so they can get to from anywhere, because we have remote students as well. So they're not, I'm not going to set them up a tunnel to come into the university. So there's nothing they need access to internally that we can't provide out in the ether for them. So put them out there and make them someone else's problem. And don't let their devices talk to each other.
All right. Any other questions? Okay. Oh, yeah, we got a couple here.
Hi, I work for a national non-for-profit healthcare system. Catholic health system. And one question that I have, I heard a lot today, and I always hear a lot about the external threat information that you're getting and the scoring, and there's too much information, et cetera. Where I work, there's been a lot of acquisition and in partnerships with other companies where we've acquired their software. And I struggle to find information on the best way to calculate the CVSS score, the component, the environmental, your environment's score in terms of the risk so that you can prioritize the work. So I'm just curious if others have run into that, and like if there's a secret sauce that I just haven't found yet on the variables that you should use to calculate that information.
Wow, that's a tricky question. I'm sure that Kristi has a good answer to it. I will say, for someone that's done a ton of M&A in my career, having a really good M&A playbook, right, in terms of what you scan first, usually what we would do is do an external pen test against them. We would deploy our EDR and our vulnerability management solutions within their environment first before allowing any kind of connectivity. And then use that to help prioritize stuff. But I think prioritizing vulnerabilities is a really difficult question, and that a bunch of vendors, no offense to all the vendors in here, will tell you that they can do it. Nobody can do it really well, because vulnerability prioritization is unique to you, right? So what is unique to your nonprofit hospital is going to be totally different than what it is for everybody else in the room. So is that something that you have in your environment that could actually be executed, that's being used against your company, your industry, your regional area, all of those things? I think that plays into it. Kristi, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I'll completely jump on that. There's no secret sauce, unfortunately. I'll go back to kind of my former life as a military intelligence officer, where what I like to tell my team is we have to identify our high-value targets internally. And so that needs to be not only part of our own playbooks, but also needs to be part of any M&A. So we have a couple of individuals who are from IT and cybersecurity that are part of our early M&A action groups, and that's specifically what we do. We work with the potential M&A committees, and we say, what are your high-value targets? What is it that actually makes your company money? What makes you operate? And where is your safety and your biggest items that you have to protect, number one? And you prioritize those assets, number 1 through 5 for us, and we identify those 1 through 5 for them. And then next, I take that and I say, okay, what is directly internet accessible and why? Again, there is absolutely nobody but ourselves that can answer that question. No vendor can tell me that until we know who we are internally also.
I'll just add to this. I think you mentioned putting in values into the CVSS spreadsheet that'll calculate. Like Andrew said, if you have a good M&A playbook, and then consistency in when you're evaluating a new acquisition, have a consistent set of criteria for how certain things are scored. Just be consistent with it and make sure it feels right. I mean, somebody that's just newly coming into your environment is probably going to be a bit riskier than the acquisition you did 5 years ago, because those integrations, they never complete. They just get more and more ingrained into your culture. So, like everybody said, there's no uniform answer across everybody here, but consistency within your environment.
Yeah, so I'll add to it, and we do similar to what Kristi was talking about. We tier our assets, and tier 1 is our most vulnerable or high-risk ones, and then on down. And we have basically different SLAs depending on the tier, and then depending on the critical level. That's the base, default. So if it's a CVS of 9 or a critical, then we will, prioritize those first, and then anything that then becomes breached because of whatever reason. So if we got, say, a 7-day window for a critical, if it breaches that, then we go back through and analyze those CVSs and compare that to all of our mitigations we have in place to see, okay, is that really still a critical while we troubleshoot this, or maybe it's a medium or low because of all the mitigations we have. So it is a manual process off of that, but once it hits that breach status, then we do the extra analysis, unless it's something, say, the big one out there right now is Move It, that a lot of people have experienced. That's like immediate type deal. Or if it's some other system that's out there, that's an immediate type of patch that's got to be done, and we work with that at that point. So, all right, I think we had a question over here too. Yeah.
To throw kind of a softball question at you guys, because I'm a student still. What have you found to be the most fulfilling part of working in cybersecurity as an industry?
I'll start if I may. Working with people like you, I'm serious, getting people in that is passionate with what they're doing, that is willing to learn and is willing to really dig in and is curious and is really, wanting to experience a lot. Cyber changes every day. And so if you're not willing to learn or is passionate about that, you're going to struggle off of it. And but for those that are willing and do that, I love mentoring those type of people and bringing them on, with the goal of someday they're sitting in my seat, if that's where they want to be. But I love working with the youth and even those that aren't young to bring them along and try to help them with their career. So good luck. When you graduate, come check me out, okay? I'll probably hire you.
I have to agree with Mark. I think one of the challenges that we have in our industry, they talk about 4 million open cybersecurity jobs, is that an entry-level job requires 5 years of experience.
Yeah.
So it's a chicken-egg thing. How do I get experience without a job, or how do I get a job without experience? So I think for me, it's looking at those alternative talent pipelines, right? Apprenticeships, internships, hiring people who may not have a cybersecurity experience, but may have some other experience that you can bring in and you can teach the cybersecurity. I like to hire people for the soft skills. Mm-hmm. Someone who shows up on time, who has a good work ethic, who's asking, give me more work to do. That's someone that I can teach to do cybersecurity. So for me, it's watching those people thrive and grow and seeing them advance in their career. I think that's really the passion for me.
I'm going to go a little bit different route. Well, love that you guys want to get into cyber, and we need more people in it. Absolutely. I like this stuff because I don't know. I've always grown up wanting to secure stuff and just be better than the bad guys. And it's like, what are they doing? Well, I got to beat them. I got to keep that, from getting in. So it's almost like a game for me. And I eat that stuff up. And cyber gang. Yeah, got to stop them all or something like that. Yeah. So.
All right, I'm going to take a little bit of a different turn and geek out a bit. I like being a part of history. And I will say that very openly and proud. So in my former life, in my collegiate years, I studied military history, and I worked as a museum curator. And when I retire, I will fully plan to go back and be a docent, a volunteer. I will work in a museum, any kind, I don't care. I love history. This is today's history. It is. So civilians of today are the soldiers. I worked in the military, and that's whenever I realized that we no longer are soldier versus soldier in warfare anymore. We are now soldier versus civilian, and we are the soldiers protecting our critical infrastructure and keeping us operational as a country and as a nation. If we don't secure ourselves with our critical infrastructure, our own businesses, and ourselves, we are going to lose, and it's going to continue to be painful, and we can't say what we're going to be in a decade, 50 years, or 100 years from now. So that's why it's so important, because the new weapons are in code. They're no longer in guns and cannons.
I get to tell people, no, you can't do that. I will echo other sentiments I heard up here, is that I have had the opportunity to hire people who didn't have info security experience, but had an interest. And I got to help them learn the ropes, and I got to help them grow their careers and get into jobs where they did need security experience. And I was able to give them their first steps in the door. So that's been very satisfying for me.
We had another question over here, this lady right there.
Hi, oh, that's loud. So I'm really passionate about security awareness. It's not my full-time job, but it's what I kind of dabble in. And I've noticed that it's really hard to get those who aren't into security, people that are like in marketing or finance, they don't think it's as sexy as I think it is, but they're just as important in making sure that they're doing that. So how do you guys, maybe in your businesses, or how have you guys tried to make it seem like it's important besides just that compliance requirement for them?
So I'm taking a new approach that I've started in this past year, and it's saying that security can't work in a silo. We have to actually get out with our businesses. So I am now requiring my team to go out on sites and actually start meeting with people, not just from a security perspective, but a person-to-person perspective. Let them know who we are as people and how we can help them also. Because once they know who we are and that we're not just the policeman, we're not just the no person, then they know they can ask us questions. I mean, it is who we are, right? Majority say, that's the security person, I will avoid you. A little story, pre-COVID, I was in the gym in my office building, and I had a random woman come up to me and be like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, I did not mean to click that link. And I was like, that's great, I will look into that whenever I get back to my office. And I just don't want us to be the scary person. I want them to be comfortable with us. And that is a cultural change, like a deep inherent cultural change as a whole that we have to figure out and work through.
One of the things that I do is when I participate in events like this, I will talk about dead simple, how do I avoid identity theft as a person, as a consumer? I mean, there's no end to people who can talk in great detail about all the technical aspects of it, but to make it real for me and my wallet, or you and your wallet, that'll catch people's attention. And there's some things that will sort of underscore the different perspective we have that I'll say, sometimes I will call my bank and say my credit card is lost, even when it's not, just so that anybody who has stored it, it's invalidated. And if they get hacked, it's no longer a risk to me. And
you know, there are virtual cards that you could just do that with.
Not all companies have them. Citi and Capital One, I think, are the only two that I'm aware of that still have virtual. Anyway, so just making it relevant to the common people. So that's my spin.
So we had a virtual question. I'm going to paraphrase it here a little bit. So what are the challenges around BYOD and how do you handle them? I think that's a great question for Zach, since he...
I agree. Let's ask Zach.
So Kristi's just going to have another mic drop, so we got to make sure someone else gets to it first. So
BYOD, a couple layers there. I guess, you know, for us on the student side, and the faculty and staff side. So you have laptops people could be bringing, desktops, working from home, using their own devices. You have mobile devices that are in all the environments, and everyone's using there too. I think it's a multi-layer approach. So what do you want those devices to have access to? There's a lot of cool tools out there right now that you can, you know, have people be driven to, that they have to install or run to access certain resources. You know, things have come a long way from the days of VPN where that's not necessarily the answer anymore. So, and then obviously you have your SaaS platforms that can be behind, you know, a central identity platform where you have different access policies there that you can enforce. So the field to use different resources that aren't managed by your institution, organization, or whatever is growing and is easier now. But you know, still keeping in mind what they have access to. So that goes back down to the organization level as a whole. And where's your critical, you know, your crown jewel stuff at? Who has access to it? Do you want them to access it from a BYOD? I think so long as you know what those things are, who has access, the other ancillary things might be okay, but that's kind of a per organization discussion and decision with you know, executive leadership.
So Zach, I think that's the wrong answer for that. So, you know,
who are you to
does
say?
everyone agree? Wrong answer. No,
I want hands. Who's with me? Who's with Mark? Nothing? No one?
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Yes, sir. Right here in the front.
This guy needs a microphone, please.
There we go. Right behind you.
There is a magazine survey that I'm aware of that rates cybersecurity capabilities in both offensive and defensive capabilities for the various countries of the world, as well as the combined offensive and defensive. My understanding, my recollection, is somehow the United States ranked at the top on all three, or at least two of those three lists. This despite all the ransomware, the fraud, waste, and abuse, the lack of even basic cybersecurity hygiene, things like that. How does that square with the members of the panel? I'm very curious.
Well, I didn't read this magazine article that you're talking about, but I'm going to check it out. I would say that cyber warfare, as we've already talked about a little bit today, is alive and well today. There's probably about 5 big players in the cyber warfare game, and the U.S. is certainly one of those. U.S., Israel, China, North Korea, Iran, Russia. I think those are, maybe I said 5 and I meant 6. But I think as much as we read about those things, I think the U.S. Has a lot of offense capabilities that we may not know about, or we probably shouldn't know about right now, that they may be doing. There's a great book that I recommend for you if you haven't read it yet. It's called The Perfect Weapon. And The Perfect Weapon is the story of the Stuxnet virus that was created by the U.S. and the Israeli military in conjunction to stop the Iranian subterfuges. And it was allegedly. And they dropped USB drives and they put them in an air-gapped environment, and they did like micrometers or millimeters of changes to the centrifuges so they would never actually make nuclear weapons. But anyway, I don't know. That's a really good question, and I'm going to give it over to the rest of the panel.
So I'll comment while you're handing over. So I have quite a few friends that's in 3-letter agencies that I've talked to, and that's been a conversation around that. And from what they can disclose, at least from an offensive side of things, we are in good shape, from there. Obviously, if you look at the country as a whole, it's probably a little bit different perspective. So depending on how they looked at it, if they looked at it from a government standpoint or a state actor standpoint versus the country, then yeah, we're probably still a lot better than a lot of other countries, but there's definitely a lot of other things that I think we could improve on. So
I would also say, I'm going to be very careful on how I word this. Yes, people are always listening. Here in America, we are naturally distrusting of our government. And therefore, it forces us as private organizations to say, I need my own talent because I'm not going to trust the government to protect me from that. And we see on the news all these conversations about Russia, China, North Korea, everyone else, and all of these attacks. And again, it's like, I'm not going to rely on my government. I'm going to get my own defenses. I'm going to get my own skills and my own people, and I'm going to raise them up. Versus culturally, some of those other top 5s, it's completely driven by the directives of their government organizations.
America has a lot more stuff we want to attack too. So,
yeah.
We got stuff.
There is a noted absence of an American flag in this room, but we happen to be in the country that has been the forefront of technology for over 100 years. Since we invented trains, probably in the Industrial Revolution. So, to me, it just follows that we would continue to lead in a number of spaces, and this is just the latest.
Yeah. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
I had a question that's, I guess, more of a cultural question again, and this has to do back with insider threat. And a lot of products, some products we've heard about today have user behavior analytics and all that. But culturally, how then do you introduce this into your company if you find, one of your top VPs downloading thousands of emails at 2 in the morning and your HR department just really doesn't want to hear about that? Now, that's a hypothetical, of course, but...
I'm asking for a friend.
Yeah.
Has anybody else had experience with the cultural inertia around actually trying to look at insider threat as something, we all acknowledge it can happen, but certainly not to us, because we're all great people, and the evil ones are all somewhere else.
Can we take?
All right.
So I'll start. So hopefully on all of your networks you have a user access policy. And whether HR likes it or not, or finance or whoever, that user access policy gives IT/security the right to monitor and control access to that network. And so as a CISO, it is my responsibility to reduce the risk and protect the organization from threats, whether it's inside or out, or reduce risk. And if it's deemed that I feel that there's a insider threat that could happen, you know, banking, I don't know why anyone would want to do anything with a bank, but you know, you want to be able to look for those insider threats and be able to respond accordingly. But it all goes back to that user access policy that every day when someone logs in, they're agreeing to, and that's how you handle it. Whether the other departments, you know, like it or not, go back to user access policy. It says you have the right to monitor. So.
Let's do a show of hands in the audience here, and you're dating yourselves when you answer this, so it's okay. Who remembers Clippy from Microsoft Word? Anybody? Okay, so my favorite approach to DLP is a Clippy-like thing that says, hey, VP guy, we see that you are downloading all of your emails. Please input here the business justification for why you are doing that. Simple as that. That type of awareness where people know that you're monitoring them and know that you know what they're doing starts to prevent negative behavior.
Yeah, I would agree strongly with what Andrew said, and then also just reinforce that, you know, it's at the end of the day, you know, you could see something that looks like insider threat, insider risk, and you report that, and it's kind of up to the business on how they want to handle that. I mean, you can see it, you can report it, but, you know, if you take it and the other, you know, the president, the CEO, or whoever is like, okay, that's fine, I mean, that's kind of it. that's where they go. I mean, just document it and know it so it doesn't ever fall back on you and you end up like an Uber CISO or anything like that.
Yeah, it's our job to point the risk out, and if an executive wants to accept that risk, then sure, sign on the little line here saying that you know. So, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't want to say low-key shaming, but I think sometimes that's the most effective, right? Having a, you know, little clippy on there so it's, you know, person to person, like, oh, they can see me, right? That sort of thing. I also, especially whenever it comes to upper leadership, I have this tact where I have a form that's a risk acceptance form that says, that's okay, VP. You can do whatever you'd like to. However, I have identified this activity taking place, and I want you to take full acceptance of that risk and any activities following it associated to it, both financially and physically as a part of that. Thank you, and we'll give a copy to HR. I have never had anybody actually sign that for me, and I have noticed that behaviors quickly change.
I know they don't like it when I call them and say I have a problem. That's, you know, usually when I'm calling, if it's 8 o'clock in the morning, they're like, I don't know. You tell me if it's a nice day or not, you know, so. Okay. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Microphone. He's coming.
He's coming.
Beer on the floor,
Oh, look at that.
Oh, party foul.
So a lot of this is focused on internal protections. I'd like to see something in the space of external. When you call me as a customer, there's a lot of social engineering, spoofing, or even voice sampling with robocalling. And with the evolution of deep fake or voice sampling, I would like to see more authentication mechanisms where I can authenticate you as the company that you are who's actually calling me. Because they can talk you into conversation and sample that conversation and then use that conversation at their will.
Well, most banks will not call you, so it won't be from your bank. It won't be from the IRS. It won't be from Microsoft. It won't be from, who else? Oracle.
Credit cards.
Yeah, or the local police. Yeah, Google's another one. So yeah, I think if someone's calling, just hang up. That's what I tell people. And then if they're, you know, let them send you a certified letter. Then at that point, you know, so.
Actually, my bank has called me to say that there's been fraud on my card, and I will often the first thing they do is they say, I need to speak to John Newcomer, and can you verify one of the security questions? And I say, no, I won't. But I will call the number on the back of my card and call them, because that way it's a number I know, and I know I'm talking to somebody, and they will either say, no, we don't have anything on file, or yes, we did attempt to call you. Your card was involved. A couple of years ago, there was a local grocery store chain that got hacked, and one of my cards got it was a grocery store. It was a local. Anyway, so I'm not naming names. They are. But that is a way to do the mutual authentication. They let me know that there was a problem, but I wouldn't play ball with a call that I didn't start. But I did the
exactly.
Yeah.
And with bank fraud like that, typically that's almost instantaneous. As soon as you swipe it, within like a minute you get a response.
Yeah.
And that's a little different than them calling you out of the blue and then they start asking you a bunch of questions.
But that's something that, as a consumer, I take as a responsibility to not trust the caller ID or what they're saying when they call me.
Great question. Any others? Okay, so I'll read off another one here. It is impossible to stop all cyber attacks, so organizations should focus more resources on recovering from cyber incidents. Why or why not?
I know Andrew has an amazing response lined up for this.
Yeah.
So there's two types of companies. Those who know they've been breached or those who think they have not been breached. Because everybody has been. So if you don't have a really good recovery plan, if you don't have immutable storage, if you don't have a way to get back, and you're thinking about how you're going to defend your network, you're going in the wrong direction. That's my opinion.
Go ahead. If you have a follow-up, go ahead.
No, it's fine. It sounds like everyone else already said it, so it's fine.
Okay.
Everyone else. Yep.
Yeah. All right. This gentleman right here.
You guys should all have really, really good disaster recovery plans and incident response plans. While we're waiting, you should do that.
So as Andrew said, there's two methodologies. What about the third methodology of always assuming you're breached? Or all?
The first one was companies that know they've been breached. Okay, that's always assuming you're breached,
Okay.
and companies that don't think they've been breached.
Well, then I'm wrong.
That's okay.
You already got a drink.
Well, that's a zero trust principle right there. So if you follow zero trust,
Google's
you assume
principle,
that you're
just always assume you're breached.
So.
And I would also say, so yes, have an amazing recovery plan because every one of us either has or will go through this, right? I also get a deep joy in doing everything I can to know that those attackers trying to get my network, it's as painful and as costly as possible. So when we talk about defense in depth, for me, it's like, all right, you're gonna get in, but you're gonna have to use every tool set you possibly can that I haven't identified already, and I'm gonna make it just the worst day of your life if I possibly can on your way in.
Yeah. And honestly, I hope all this speaking and public appearances, we're talking about this stuff, so I'm hoping that they'll say, well, they're talking about it, so maybe they're doing this, so maybe I should go look somewhere else, Or they're going to say, here, hold my beer, one or the other. And I'm hoping it's not the latter. So
it's like the Forbes top most secure companies in the world that they published recently, and it's like, well, that's not a giant bullseye or target on their back or anything.
That's right.
That article was complete bullshit and was made on security scorecard ratings. Yeah, so come on.
ChatGPT created
I think it's kind of like having the I have an alarm system thing on your house. Right? So if someone's going to rob you and they see that, they're like, oh, I'll go rob somebody who doesn't have an alarm. So maybe that'll help. Okay, we got another question in the back.
Since we've been talking about AI today, is there anything as cybersecurity professionals that we should do to, as one slide talked about, replacement, to reduce the chance of our job being replaced by AI? Is there any new education we should be trying to...
You're answering your own question right there. If we do not continue to develop ourselves and learn, we will become obsolete. The skills that you're using today were not the same skills you were using 5 years ago, and they're not the same skills you're going to be using 5 years from now. I recommend that you and your teams devote at least 10% of your time to learning and training. And some of that might be about AI, right? Maybe you have some people on your team who you want to teach them how to use AI better to help advantage the team. But whatever other skills you want to learn, anything that's new and different than you have today, go and do that. Spend enough of your time doing it. If you don't care about your career, nobody else is going to do that for you.
Yeah, that. And learning how to fight machines. Yeah. John Connor.
And I'll add to that also that if you're, there's a lot of times, especially in larger organizations, you can get siloed and you're just learning one thing. Branch yourself out immediately and start learning other things. The way I got through my career was I never said no on an opportunity to learn something new. And by doing that, that'll continue to progress you in your career, and it'll get you further, and it'll keep you from being siloed to where if you do have to leave or you're forced to leave your organization, you have more options. You could talk educatedly and not make up a bunch of BS that they're going to know during the interview that you don't know something. So constantly learn. This is a field that if you're not constantly learning, you're falling behind. So listen to those podcasts, read those articles, take courses, whatever you need to do, constantly learn. So they're mocking us over here. I can see that. So
the only exception I take to what Andrew said is that what we're doing today isn't what we were doing 5 years ago. How many people are still dealing with SQL injection and cross-site scripting on their websites?
I would also add, part of what your question was, we will never be replaced with AI in security, but we have to make sure that we are adapting and growing with technology. And the reason that we will never be replaced as security is because our attackers will never be fully AI, right? So we have to be prepared for knowing what that bad guy is thinking and doing, and that's how we're going to defend against them, right? So we have to automate and be efficient, stay up to date with technology, grow, train, and develop, but we have to do that as people and make our technology efficient along the way also.
Okay, I got another virtual question here. Again, going back to UEBA, something that I've been working on since joining my company. What are the ways your security teams have advanced this analytics program? What could be some good mindset tricks to have when advancing this? Thank you, sir.
So to me, it's anomalous behavior. Right, and I think if you look at like Azure has UEBA kind of built into it, even if you're E3 and not E5 licenses, somebody's nodding their head back there, and you can set different threshold levels. And what we've normally done is, anytime you see a high alert, block it immediately. Anytime you see a medium alert, then you need to prompt for an MFA. And anytime you see a low alert, just pass it and we'll look at it. And when you start to look at those logs, it's pretty easy to create rules around it. So somebody that logs in from 2 geographic locations that are impossible to be at in that amount of time, that's an obvious block, and Microsoft will do that for you. People that are normally work 8 to 5 and are logging in at 2 o'clock in the morning and downloading a ton of data, that's an anomalous behavior. So looking for those anomalies and creating rules around it and continuing to tune and progress your rules to benefit your organization. Again, what is unique to you is unique to you. You may have weird users who do strange stuff at certain hours, but once you map that, you'll be able to see that, and as long as you keep tuning and improving those rules, you'll get to where you want to go.
All right. Any other questions out here? Okay, yes, Reggie?
So with AI and machine learning, how is that potentially will impact, I guess, cybersecurity insurance in the future?
I don't think that's going to affect insurance, at least not in the near future. I think having controls in place and doing best practices and due diligence and a good risk program is going to do you more good than stating that you have AI. MFA, microsegmentation are some of the big things that they're looking for, at least on current programs and questionnaires that I've seen. So going above and beyond that and making sure you're continuously monitoring whether that's with AI or without, I don't think will matter too much. So maybe in 10 years down the road.
I think the latest two things that I've seen in the cyber insurance area are, one, companies that are considered uninsurable and therefore need to kind of self-insure. And the best way to self-insure is to have a strong cybersecurity team and know what you're doing and accept the risk. Thank you for the clapping over there. The other thing that I've seen is separate questionnaires related to OT security. So whereas that might have not been on their radar so much before, having a really good OT security program, especially if you're in mining or manufacturing or something like that where you have a lot of OT, I think that's a really important thing for cyber insurers going forward.
Yeah, I'm just going to add, I mean, higher ed in general, I think, is the #1 attack vertical now. I think we've surpassed healthcare and banking and government this last year. So, I mean, for us, higher ed and education in general is quickly becoming one of those non-insurable organizations. So even though, we may have A+ across the board and everything, and you're doing, zero trust and EDR and MFA and everything, all the other acronyms, they still just might not do it, or your premiums are going to be astronomically high, just because it's such a big attack vector that's getting slammed all the time, and you don't have the resources there to kind of secure that. I don't think AI changes that. The same principles hold true that we use today to prevent attacks right now. They just come maybe faster and crafted with better grammar.
Any other questions? Okay, so I think this one's a good one. Make sure I got the right one. Yep. How can the importance of security and compliance budgets be conveyed to stakeholders during the economic downturn or struggle?
I'm trying to say this tactfully. What's worked out best for me and my company personally is that during economic downturns, there are other companies very similar to mine that get attacked very publicly and very loud. So an example for mine is Colonial Pipeline. Whenever Colonial Pipeline got hit big and hard, I was able to go, see, this is what happens with an exact setup that we have. And they're like, oh, you're right. Just because it's a downturn and we're cutting everyone else's budget, maybe we shouldn't cut yours, because they lost a lot more money as a result of that. And then we go back through the exercise of, okay, if we have this specific site down due to ransomware for this amount of time, how much money do we lose per minute, per hour? Oh, they were down for 5 days? Okay, never mind. Here's your budget back.
I think it goes back to something that Marc said earlier. I think our job as cybersecurity professionals is to be subject matter experts, to understand the risk appetite of our organizations, and to say, here's a risk that we have. Here's 3 different things that we can do to address it. This one is very cheap. This one costs kind of a middle amount of money. This one's expensive. And it depends how much you want to try to mitigate that risk. And I'll do any of those 3 things that you need me to implement. You tell me how bad that risk is to you and what you want to do. So if you want to cut my budget because of those things, we can do that. It's up to the risk appetite of the business, really.
Yeah. And I think, I had a CFO told me that he didn't want to be the one that blames for a breach and because he cut the cyber budget. And so hopefully your CFO has that. But there's also still, as the security leader or even IT leader, you still have to justify your tool sets, what you're bringing in, what you want to do. And I bet most of you have probably at least 30% of your tools that there's overlap that could cause you to be able to really release one, still have your coverage that you need, and free up some budget to make the CFO happy, but yet not necessarily get your budget cut. So,
are you suggesting that we sandbag our budgets, Marc?
Maybe, yeah, you might want to. So, all right.
I don't have much of a budget to sandbag. It's hardly anything.
We could just cut the internet connection, and that'll save a lot of problems, right? So,
turn all the servers off.
Yep. All right. Any questions out here in the audience, real quick? Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, this is an easy question. If you feel comfortable, what password saver application would you most recommend? Because I'm starting to feel like just put it on a piece of paper in my house under my keyboard is the safest.
So definitely not LastPass. For those of you who were listening to our keynote earlier, they offered me a 25% off if I would come back. I will not come back. I'm currently using, and I'm safe to admit this, I'm currently using 1Password. I previously used KeePass, which is free, but it's kind of kludgy and it's not very user-friendly. I don't recommend it for people who are not very technical. I like 1Password. It's not perfect, but you know, it's pretty good. And I have like 600 passwords, so you know, I'm not going to write them down in my house.
We used KeePass for a while. We're on a Keeper solution now. But maybe LastPass will learn from their mistakes and get better in time. Yeah, after the next third breach, fourth breach, maybe.
Yep.
I do use KeePass. I like that it's offline. It only exists where I put the data file. There's plenty of clients for my desktop, for my phone, and I just copy the data file where I want it, and nobody online can get access to it. I did read that there's an exploit, but you have to have physical possession of the machine. Right. So if they're in my house, there's not much I can do about it. So I still like KeePass.
Well, just make all your passwords the same, right? And then you don't have to worry about that. No, please do not do that. Do not do that, okay? You're going to get quoted. I know, yeah. Do not quote me on that. That was a joke, okay? So, you know, from an enterprise, you know, there's a lot of good products out there too. Was it Secret Server is a good one, and I think Bitwarden, or is it Bitwarden that's got, I think they have an enterprise as well as a consumer product. So the biggest thing, you know, from an enterprise, you want to make sure you can audit all access and activity and those sort of things. So, okay. Great question. And again, don't quote me, that was a joke. Okay, all right. Yes, sir, back in the back.
Yeah, since we are talking about the passwords, we have a lot of tools that, you know, to store the password, but there are certain tools where you can calculate the strength of the password, right? So for example, if I give a password of 13 or 15 characters, it says 15 years to crack the password. Do they really mean that, or is it just something to, you know, make us use those passwords? How does it work?
You know, the guy that wrote the original standards on password complexity has retracted everything that he said. I think really the future, and I bet there's a bunch of people in the room that are going to agree with me, is passwordless, right? We're going to get away from passwords, whether it's 15 characters or 50 characters or whatever it is. Now, personally, I make my passwords as long as complicated as possible for that site. If it'll take 99 characters, I use 99 characters because I don't care, because I'm using 1Password. I don't know the password. I have no idea what it is, and it's super complicated. One time my mom needed to log into my Southwest account, and she was like, Andrew, there are these symbols that have like little squiggly lines. I can't even find that on the keyboard. So my mom's from Alabama.
Oh, okay.
Just so you know. Okay, so anyway, I think the future is passwordless, whether it's 15 characters or 99 characters. I think just get away from passwords altogether. I love my YubiKey. I think that's a great thing. It's in my hand. Nobody else has it. There's no way to hack that, at least right now. So anyway, that's my answer.
Yes, sir.
Okay, segue in. To my question is, what do you think of Windows Hello for Business? Do you think that's a viable solution for passwordless?
I think it's a good transition step for it, because it's getting you used to you know, multiple different ways to authenticate. It's getting multi-factor off of there between, you know, either facial, fingerprint, you know, your token, you know, plus PIN and those sort of things. And it resides on the computer, so it's not used elsewhere. Much like, you know, on your iPhone and everything, that stays, your fingerprint data stays on that machine. It doesn't go to Apple. And so, to me, I think it's a good step to transition people to the next level, and it's just a matter of time. So.
We don't mandate it, but we do strongly encourage it at the university for everyone, and it's pretty highly adopted. So yeah, good step.
Mm. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. So. So does technology such as AI, machine learning, automated tools play a role in communicating cyber threats to the board and business leaders?
Yes. I mean, I let them know about it and what's going on with it, and that we are aware.
I would say it can, but it really depends on the culture of your board and your leadership, right? My board and leadership, especially over the last couple of years, they don't trust anything on the news. They don't trust any data that's given to them that doesn't come from us, because they've gotten to this point, and I would say almost a cyber maturity of understanding that just because it's written in the news like this, or this threat or scare looks like this, doesn't mean it applies to us in the same way as a business. So they're not as interested in seeing dashboards or fancy reports on a regular basis. They'd rather call me up and say, hey, Brent or Kristi, I read this or I saw this. What's your 10-second update on it?
We just need to hope that the AI that it gives to the board isn't one of those hallucinations that it has.
So I want to talk really quickly about cybersecurity expertise on boards. Anybody seen that new SEC rule that's going to hit in October? It requires all public companies to have a cybersecurity expert on their board. So what's been happening, which is really interesting, is that existing board members who have no idea of anything about cybersecurity are taking these 2-day or sometimes 3-day courses. I see somebody shaking his head like this is crazy, and they are becoming cybersecurity experts. So I want to ask the group this question. So I'm a cybersecurity expert, right? I've been 20 years plus. I think we can all agree that I am. Maybe some of you disagree. Now, if I took a 2-day or a 3-day course on corporate finance, could I then go on a board as a financial expert? Anybody? Does that sound cool to you? Use AI. If I use AI? So to me, the audacity that a current board member could take a 2 or a 3-day course on cybersecurity and then consider themselves a cybersecurity expert is just absolutely ridiculous.
That's why Kim let me up here.
Exactly, that's why Kim let him up here. He took that 2 or 3-day course.
Good, it was really good.
All right. Okay, any questions? Quick audience check. All right. What are the biggest communication challenges for the CISO's teams, and how can they be addressed?
Cybersecurity professionals are inherently not good at communication. Maybe some of you are very good at it. I'm okay.
Take a 2-day course.
Take a 2-day course and you can be an expert. One of the things we talked about in the keynote is using AI to help you, right, to craft messages. I actually, in multiple companies that I've worked at, we have hired a communications person to join the cybersecurity team in order to help us better communicate with the user community. I think that's a great idea. Maybe you could partner with your communications team in your company if you don't have enough resources to do that. I think it's really important. We don't give enough importance to the soft skills of cybersecurity and communicating with users, making it important to them, security awareness, making it meaningful to people. I think those are the communication challenges, besides the board stuff, which we just talked about.
Yeah, and I'd also say we probably need to open ourselves up a little bit to what we consider to be our communication challenges. For years, we've been talking about how do we change the culture of cybersecurity in our businesses? How do we communicate to our board? How do we communicate to our leadership? I mean, we kind of talk about this at ad nauseum with no real answer until our boards and our leadership actively decide to be an active part of that conversation, right? And I'll go back to something I said earlier in the session. I'm starting to reach out to my actual businesses, right? I'm reaching out to my employees out at the mine sites. I'm working with my mine site managers. I'm working with those that are actually on the operational technology. Because my biggest pushback and my biggest issues actually come from trying to work alongside the people that have the most insecure devices that I need to get to do patches, do updates, have an outage so that we can actually make these changes. If I go to my executive leadership and I say, I need this site to have, a 1-hour outage so that we can do security updates, the initial response I'm going to have is, well, how much money is that going to cost us from downtime? But if I work through the bottom up as a result of that in that framework, and I get them to understand and help support the leadership decision there, it's much less of a difficult conversation. So yes, we've switched to that conversation of a top-down model, having leadership fully support, but we can't forget to go bottom up also and make sure everyone's fully involved in cybersecurity.
Yeah, because the executives are going to hear what their people hears the loudest, or say the loudest too. So it's, yeah. All right, quick audience check. Any questions? Yes, sir, in the back.
Just a quick follow-up there, Kristi. Did you ever try using, or anyone on the panel use risk quantification to have that conversation in order to try to get that budget?
Yes.
And your thoughts on FAIR methodology or any other?
Do you want the official answer, or do you want the real Kristi answer?
The Kristi answer.
We will try ad nauseum to quantify cyber risk all day long. You're going to get FAIR and every model in the book. But when you really study, and it all comes down, it's all subjective still, right? It goes back to every single one of us is still going to get hit. It's just a matter of how bad is it, how long are we out for, or if we're out, and what our response is for it. So trying to quantify risk, which is going to be subjective anyway, is kind of a joke to me. And I teach this. And I tell my students that. I was like, you're going to have to know this and know it well, because this is how you sell it to your leadership and your board. Businesses are for money. That's all they're there for. So we have to find a way to quantify this. But the reality is, for ourselves, we also have to know how to qualify it in a realistic manner, usually through having a story and solid conversations and relationships.
So my motto is it's all in the presentation. So no matter what numbers that you have and you can show to your leadership that you need something, you can have all the justification there, but it's going to be how you're going to present it to that leadership. And usually if you show the impact of by not having it to the organization, whether it's downtime or whatever. So yeah, it's that risk quantification a little bit, but really if you can show them how it can affect the profits or something along that line, then most of the time you're going to get it through. But it's all in the presentation and how you do it. You have to be a salesperson to some degree. So, any other questions or comments from the panel on that one? We got about 4 minutes left, so one more question maybe?
You want to get the hard questions out?
Which one?
The hard one.
All right. What is one takeaway for CISO wanting to be more effective in communicating cybersecurity to the board and business leaders? We kind of touched on that, but not quite to that level.
Know what's important to the business, and know what that costs the business and kind of how you function. I mean, really just know your environment. What is it that you all do? And know how to tell the board how to protect it. I mean, you need to know what you're in.
So there was a recent report on CISOs getting into the boardroom, and it listed 5 key skills. I don't remember all 5 of them off the top of my head. One was higher education, one was diversity, one was cybersecurity experience, one was large company experience, and the other one was diversity of experience. So see, I remembered all 5 of them. What I would say is you need to be a strategic partner to the business. You need to not go in and speak cyber speak. You need to understand the business. You need to understand what they're trying to do, understand the profit they're trying to make, understand the sales organization and the financial sheet and the balance sheet and all of that kind of stuff, and then try to, move that towards a cybersecurity conversation. Not only negative risk, but also positive risk. I think the best thing that you can do in terms of the board is encourage a cybersecurity and technology committee on your board. If you have that, FedEx has that, Walmart has that. They are ahead of the game in terms of board understanding of cybersecurity risk because they have a committee that's focused on it. They're not putting it in the trash bag of the audit committee. Sorry, but it's true. They're really putting focus on it and really dedicating board members to leading that committee and understanding the risks.
I think you made up those 5. I don't think those were the real 5. I think you made them up.
All right. So I think we're out of time unless someone has a quick question here we can hit. All right. One more. The answer is yes. Unless it's to use 1Password, then that's no.
Oh, no. So with deepfakes on the rise, what's your biggest concern, and what do you see the #1 combatant to that?
I'm the CEO of your company, and I'd like you to buy some Apple gift cards for me.
Yeah. For me, it's verification of the caller. And how do you verify the caller when they're calling into your organization and you need to validate them? You know, as that becomes more and more real time, that they're able to interact and then also interface in with a you know, a Zoom or Teams or something that's doing video verification on top of it. That's going to be really scary when that happens. So, not to mention the whole political aspects of it, of being able to, you know, mimic officials or CEOs or whatever that can cause detrimental to a company or to the government. So. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, let's give a big hand to the panel here. And thank you, everyone. And I'll have Kim come up. So.
Oops. Here's some more drink tickets if anyone needs drink tickets. Feel free to grab a drink, because see that big cart full of prizes? We have